While America is spending hundreds of billions of dollars burning through its most advanced interceptor missiles, watching oil prices destroy the purchasing power of ordinary Americans, and begging allies who keep saying no, China is sitting back, watching and winning. Not winning a military battle, not winning a diplomatic argument, winning something far more valuable and far more durable, strategic position. Every day this war continues. Every day the Strait of Hormuz stays closed. Every day Trump's coalition building fails and his summits get delayed and his economy bleeds. China gets stronger. Not because China did anything, because China did nothing. And doing nothing in this specific situation, at this specific moment in history, is the most brilliant strategic move available to Beijing. Today, on Conflict Capital, we are going to show you exactly how China is winning a war it is not fighting. We are going to walk through every dimension of Beijing's advantage. The oil, the yuan, the technology, the Taiwan calculation, the trade leverage, the clean energy bet, and the diplomatic positioning. And we are going to show you why analysts from CNN to Fortune to Bloomberg to the Council on Foreign Relations are all saying the same thing. China did not need to fire a single shot in this war because America is doing all the damage to itself. Stay with us. Welcome back to Conflict Capital, where we follow the money and the strategy to find the real story. If you're new here, subscribe right now and tap the like button. What we are covering today is the kind of geopolitical analysis that most channels cannot do because most channels are too busy covering the missiles to notice who is profiting from them. Let us get into it. Let us start with the most basic question. Why would China benefit from a war it publicly opposes? China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi called the Iran conflict a war that should never have happened. China voted against the U.S. position in the United Nations Security Council. Chinese state media has been consistently critical of Operation Epic Fury. On the surface, China looks like a concerned bystander wringing its hands at American aggression. But surface appearances in geopolitics are almost always the least important thing. Look at what China is actually doing, not what it is saying, and a very different picture emerges. Start with oil. Iran is China's largest oil supplier. Satellite imagery tracked by maritime research firms showed that Iran has continued to ship large amounts of crude oil to China since the war broke out late last month, while every other country in the world is scrambling for oil. While the IEA is releasing emergency reserves, while Goldman Sachs is warning that high prices could last through 2027, while ordinary Americans are paying record prices at the pump, China is still getting Iranian oil at a discount. Iran, desperate for the revenue that Western sanctions have always denied it, has been willing to sell to China at below-market prices in exchange for the guaranteed buyer relationship that Beijing provides. Every barrel of discounted Iranian oil that reaches a Chinese refinery is a barrel that costs China less than it costs America's allies. The war that is economically devastating, Europe, Japan, South Korea, and the American consumer is providing China with a competitive energy cost advantage that will compound over months and potentially years. And here is the dimension of this that most Western coverage is missing entirely. Iran is now demanding payment for that oil in Chinese yuan, not in US dollars. This is not a new development. Iran has been moving toward yuan-denominated oil sales for years as part of its sanctions evasion strategy, but the war has dramatically accelerated it. Every barrel of Iranian oil sold in yuan is a barrel that does not flow through the US dollar-dominated global financial system. It is a transaction that strengthens the yuan's role as an international reserve currency. It is a brick in the alternative financial architecture that China has been quietly building for years. The architecture designed to eventually reduce the world's dependence on the US dollar and, with it, America's ability to use financial sanctions as a foreign policy weapon. Trump previously accused Tehran and Beijing of belonging to the axis of autocracy due to their close economic ties, as China is Iran's largest trading partner. China has also supplied Tehran with critical technology to support electronic warfare, some of which has been on display in recent weeks. The war is accelerating the very financial relationship that the United States went to war partly to disrupt. Now, let us talk about the Trump-Xi summit, because this is where China's strategic advantage becomes most visible and most immediately consequential. The Trump-Xi meeting was scheduled for March 31st to April 2nd, the first U.S. presidential visit to China since Trump's last trip in 2017. This summit was supposed to be the centerpiece of Trump's second-term foreign policy, the moment when the world's two largest economies reset their relationship after years of tariff wars, technology restrictions, and strategic competition. Trump's entire trade strategy, the tariff leverage, the technology export controls, the pressure on China over Taiwan, was designed to be exercised from a position of strength at a summit where America held the better cards. Then Operation Epic Fury started, and the cards changed. Trump's request to delay his long-awaited summit with President Xi Jinping underscores how significantly he underestimated the fallout from Operation Epic Fury, according to Ali Wine, senior research analyst at a leading think tank. The longer the war drags on, the more Trump's sense of frustration grows and his weakness becomes even more apparent. Think about what China sees when it looks at the situation today. America is bogged down in a war that was supposed to be over in days and is now in its fourth week. America's Supreme Court struck down Trump's sweeping emergency tariffs in February, eliminating the main economic weapon Trump was going to bring to the summit table. America's allies have refused to join a naval coalition, making the U.S. look isolated. America's economy is taking an oil shock that Goldman Sachs says could last through 2027. And America's president is asking China, the country he was supposed to be negotiating with from strength, to help him reopen a waterway that China has no obligation to police. His plan was to wrap things up quickly, but in the end, even after all this time, he still hasn't been able to resolve it and has gotten bogged down in it, said one Chinese source familiar with the matter. China showed little immediate sign that it was bothered by the likely delay, which analysts told NBC News may actually prove beneficial to efforts to further stabilize relations. Right now, the Iran war is clearly the Trump administration's top foreign policy priority, so I doubt Beijing will interpret an American delay as an intentional negotiation tactic, said Austin Strange, an associate professor of politics at the University of Hong Kong. China does not need this summit to happen right now. China can wait. Every additional week of war weakens Trump's negotiating position, increases his desperation to show progress on something, and reduces the pressure China feels to make concessions on trade, technology, or Taiwan. The delay of the summit is not a problem for Beijing. It is a gift. Let us talk about the Taiwan dimension, because this is the one that American strategic planners are losing the most sleep over. Transfers of military assets from the Indo-Pacific region to the Middle East, including a sizable portion of Marines deployed there as part of a rapid response unit and an anti-missile defense system, have raised concerns that the U.S. could get distracted from its own stated priority to refocus on Asia. The longer this war continues, and the more forces that are shifted out of Asia, the more it will feed Asian allies' concerns about U.S. distraction and resource constraints, said Zach Cooper, a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. The United States has been moving military assets, carriers, destroyers, Marines, THAAD batteries, aviation squadrons, from their normal positions in the Pacific to the Persian Gulf. Every asset that moves from the Pacific to the Gulf is an asset that is not available to deter China in the Taiwan Strait. China is watching this redeployment with the closest possible attention, not because China is planning to move on Taiwan this week or next month, but because the data about American force disposition, where things are, how long it takes to move them, what gaps the movement creates, is exactly the kind of intelligence that shapes long-term strategic planning. China is learning, in real time, how America responds to a major Middle Eastern crisis, which assets it moves, how fast, and what it leaves behind. A delay in the state visit could also mean a delay in any arms sales to the self-governing island of Taiwan to deter attacks from Beijing, said Cooper. Taiwan arms packages require presidential attention and congressional coordination. A president consumed by an active war in the Middle East is a president who has less bandwidth for Taiwan policy. Every week of American distraction in the Gulf is a week during which Taiwan's defensive modernization program moves more slowly. China has not gained military leverage over Taiwan by anything it has done. It has gained it by patiently watching America exhaust itself elsewhere. Now let us talk about the clean energy dimension, because this is perhaps the most underappreciated aspect of China's long-term strategic advantage from this war. The bet that China made over a decade ago on clean energy, becoming the world's biggest producer of solar panels, batteries, and electric vehicles, is clearly paying off right now, said Edward Fishman, senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. And that's going to give China a huge amount of leverage, because they're the ones who hold the key to all of those technologies, Fishman said. Think about what happens in the aftermath of this war, whenever it ends. Every government in the world, in Europe, in Asia, in the Americas, is going to look at what just happened. A single choke point in the Persian Gulf shut down 20% of global oil supply for weeks and caused an economic shock that will cost trillions of dollars in lost growth. And every one of those governments is going to accelerate their transition away from oil dependence toward alternative energy. Solar panels, batteries, electric vehicles, exactly the technologies that China dominates. The war that America started to eliminate an Iranian nuclear threat is going to be the event that triggers the biggest global clean energy investment surge in history. And China is positioned to be the primary supplier for that surge. China, along with the rest of the world, may suffer economically from the war, but it also faces a chance to reap political benefits. The war has offered Beijing a golden opportunity to position itself as a reliable and peace-loving alternative global leader when the Gulf nations and Europe have grown increasingly wary of an unpredictable U.S. administration. This is perhaps the subtlest but most powerful of China's strategic gains. Since Operation Epic Fury began, China has been publicly calling for a ceasefire, offering diplomatic mediation, and positioning itself as the responsible alternative to American military adventurism. Gulf states that have hosted American bases and aligned themselves with Washington for decades are now watching as America launches wars in their neighborhood, sends oil prices through the roof, and asks them to contribute to a naval coalition while their own economies bleed. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, and Kuwait are all quietly asking themselves the same question. Is America the reliable partner we thought it was, or is China the more stable long-term bet? That question was already being asked before February 28th. The war has made it louder, more urgent, and harder to answer in America's favor. Let us be direct about something here, because Conflict Capital believes in honest analysis even when the honest analysis is uncomfortable. China is not rooting for this war to end. China wants this war to continue for as long as possible without becoming a direct U.S.-China confrontation. Every additional week of war is another week of discounted Iranian oil, another week of yuan-denominated transactions, another week of U.S. forces in the Gulf and not in the Pacific, another week of Trump weakened going into the summit, another week of European and Gulf governments questioning American reliability, another week of global clean energy investment accelerating toward Chinese technology. The optimal outcome for Beijing is a war that drags on for months, exhausts American military resources and economic capacity, destroys America's alliance relationships, shifts global energy purchasing patterns permanently toward alternatives that China supplies, and ends with a Trump so desperate for a win that he comes to Beijing prepared to make concessions on trade and Taiwan that he never would have made from a position of strength. President Trump's request to delay his long-awaited summit with President Xi Jinping underscores how significantly he underestimated the fallout from Operation Epic Fury, said Ali Wine of the think tank Rhodium Group. That sentence contains the entire strategic situation in 17 words. Trump underestimated the fallout, and in international relations, the country that most accurately estimates the consequences of its actions is usually the one that wins. China estimated the consequences of American military action against Iran very accurately, which is why China stayed out of the way and is now benefiting from every consequence America failed to foresee. There's one final dimension that we want to make sure you understand before we close, and it is the most important long-term one. If Xi evaluates that the conflict has weakened Trump's negotiating position, it may ultimately drive Beijing to be bolder in its approach to the U.S., said Charles Austin Jordan, senior research analyst at Rhodium Group in Washington, D.C. A bolder China, on trade, on Taiwan, on the South China Sea, on technology standards, on the global financial system, is not an abstract geopolitical scenario. It is a concrete change in the behavior of the world's second largest economy that will affect American businesses, American consumers, American jobs, and American security for years and decades. China is not winning this war by shooting anyone. It is winning it by watching America shoot itself in the foot, in the wallet, and in its alliance relationships, and then positioning itself to benefit from every wound. Here at Conflict Capital, we try to give you the full picture, the missiles and the money, the strategy, and the consequences. The China dimension of this war is the one that most American media is either not covering or covering only in fragments. We hope this video gave you the complete version. Before you go, drop a comment below. Do you think China is handling this war brilliantly, or is there a risk that Beijing overplays its hand? And if you think the people following this war deserve to understand China's role in it, share this video. Send it to someone who is watching the missiles and missing the chess game happening behind them. Hit the like button, share this video, and we will see you in the next one. Stay sharp, stay curious. This is Conflict Capital.